Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to SHRM webcast on adopting digital first learning to maximize skilling impact in partnership with Upside LMS. I'm Neha Pant, part of the knowledge and advisory team at SHRM India, and I'm going to be your host for the next 60 minutes. Well, the future of work has already arrived for a large majority of the online white collar workforce. Research suggests that 84% of employers are set to rapidly digitalize working processes, which includes a significant expansion of remote work. And it has the potential to move 44% of their workforce to operate remotely. Now, to address the concerns about productivity and well being, about one third of all employers expect to also take steps to create a sense of community, connection, and belonging among employees. And this is all with digital tools to tackle the well being challenges posed by the shift of the remote work. World Economic Forum also suggests that 50% of all employees will need reskilling by 2025 as adoption of technology increases. In today's webcast, we have some eminent guests who will talk to us about the present and the future of digital learning. Before I introduce them to you, I want to highlight a few things. If you've been attending our webcasts, you would know that this webcast will be recorded and will be available for viewing on our website later. The participant audio and video is usually disabled in a webcast, but that shouldn't discourage you from participating in this conversation. Your primary mode of interaction is going to be chat, so do ensure you keep those comments coming in. Share your thoughts with us. If there are any insights from your organization that you'd like to share, as we have a conversation here today, do share that with us too. And we are also going to use some external tools of engagement, so do participate. These conversations come alive with your contributions, so do ensure you keep those comments coming. And feel free to post your questions at any time. We are not going to have a Q&A at the end of the discussion. We will try to integrate all your questions in our conversation at logical points. So feel free to shoot any questions that you have in the chat window there. All right, so on that note, let me introduce you to our eminent guests here today. First up, we have Dr. Rajiv Sinha, who's Head of Business Excellence, Corporate HR, Learning and Development at Larsen & Toubro. Dr. Sinha is a knowledge management and e-learning professional who comes with about 21 years of experience across wide gamut of functions, including knowledge management, e-learning strategy formulation, and learning management system. He has designed and implemented knowledge management strategy and systems for L&T Hydrocarbon, which included design of hard and soft initiatives, assessment of infrastructure requirements, design and maintenance of knowledge management portal, rewards and recognitions, and a lot more. Welcome, Dr. Sinha. It's a pleasure to have you here with us.
Thank you. Thanks.
Next up, we have Namita Nagar, who's Head Learning and Development at Bajaj Allianz General Insurance. Namita is experienced Head of Talent Management and Engagement with the demonstrated expertise in career development programs, talent and performance management, engagement and rewards management, coupled with a very strong strategic HR business partner experience. Welcome, Namita. Great to have you here.
Hi, Neha.
And we also have with us Amit Gautam, who's founder and CEO Upside LMS. Amit comes with over 17 years of experience in delivering high-end enterprise-scale learning technology solutions and services. He co-founded Upside Learning early 2004, and it's been a learning experience for him ever since. He's won a large number of awards and along with the trust and confidence of large number of customers. So that's the eminent panel that we have for you here today to have that interesting conversation. But before we actually get started, I thought that I would ask our audience the first question that I usually do in our webcast. So for this, we'd like you to pick up your mobile device or maybe open up a browser window and go to menti.com. And we'd like to know from you, what do you think has been L&D's evolution in the last 2 years? So tell us, what's that one word that comes to mind when we look at how L&D has evolved in the last 2 years? And in just a little bit, I am going to come to the panelists and ask them the question as well. So everyone, once again, you'll see the code right at the top of the screen. please go to menti.com. You can use your mobile device to do this, or you can also use a separate browser window on your machines. Type in menti.com, use the code 56591086. Somebody from the team, please also put that code in the chat window. 56591086. Once again, of course, there are some words that have already started showing up. So go ahead, tell us what's that one word that comes to mind when we look at the evolution of L&D in the last 2 years. All right, wonderful. Digitalization, agile, digital, self-internet to learn, virtual. Virtual is right in the middle, of course, and just before we were coming into this session, you're talking about how easily we have taken to virtual learning. We perhaps were a little opposed to the idea of really learning in the virtual space, but look how comfortable we have gotten. We were talking about all the fancy virtual backgrounds that we are using today, and we have all taken to technology so quickly. So as this word cloud builds up, I wanted to come to you, Dr. Sinha, first. Maybe you tell us what's the first word that comes to mind when you think of the evolution that has happened in the last 2 years, and also give us a sense of, what the learning landscape is looking like at your organization.
Okay, thanks, Neha. So last 2 years for the L&D professional, I will say like a very interesting time. And although L&D or learning training was always at the center of for the organization, but during this time, it became like a core of the many things. Actually, I will say in this landscape. So on. A lot of things actually changed. Coming on that point, a lot of things changed in the last 2 years. Earlier, if you see, the whole training space was dominated by the classroom training.
Yeah.
Probably even the organization who has adopted the e-learning mode or the digital learning mode in a big way, still probably ratio was 80-20 or maybe 70-30 at best. 70% of the classroom and the 30% was the digital learning. That was the typical mix, I would say. In fact, it will be more tilted towards the classroom only. But probably this ratio itself is reversed now.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the trainings are now in the digital mode. Maybe the tool may be different. We are talking about LMS, we are talking about LXP, we are talking about AR, VR, or even the simulators and all those things. But essentially, these are the digital mode of the learning, and that has taken a center stage. Yep. Even the typical training programs which used to having the case study, and which was always thought that probably the case studies can be best suited in the classroom environment only, that is also being tried in the online mode or the virtual mode. We will see the effectiveness. Time is still, I will say, it will take some time to really gauge or really understand the effectiveness of those method also. But that ratio is definitely reversed actually. Mass training is going to be with the online mode or the digital mode. Mm-hmm. And maybe probably very niche kind of training program will go into the classroom mode. That is I am seeing that this is the change is happening, and it will lead towards that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The cycle's been reversed. So, Namita, I wanted to come to you. What's catching your attention here? Lots of words that are showing up on the screen. What has been, the shift that you've experienced at Bajaj Allianz?
Yeah, thank you, Neha. And picking from what Dr. Sinha mentioned and what I'm seeing on the word cloud, I think all of it resonates with us at Bajaj Allianz as well. If I have to pick up one thing and call it out as a shift, I think it would be learners' behavior towards learning. I think that has seen a gradual shift, which has forced organizations now to make things available to people at the time of need. Yeah, that's the change. And that's exactly what we have seen. Businesses are changing very fast. The need to upskill and reskilling is becoming as crucial as it can be. And that's where the need was for us as well. And I see across the industry that there was a need to look at a new learning strategy, one that focuses on the skill development, the skills which are the need of today and which will be the need of future, as well as the learning medium. Like Dr. Sinha mentioned, the curve is reversed now. I agree to him completely. And that's also because now learners have become more aware. They want everything through smartphones or digital mediums, and they want everything as personalized as it can be. The Netflix of today has made life very different for who the learner is now. And when I say a modern learner, I don't mean, I'm not categorizing it as per age or any other demography, but I'm saying a modern learner is a learner of a today who wants everything personalized, everything available at the time of the need. So that's the shift that I see. Yeah.
Sure, thank you. Amit, I wanted to come to you now. Of course, you've been interacting with different organizations. So tell us what's standing out for you.
I think between Dr. Rajiv and Namita, they manage learning at a reasonable scale. It's not a small group of people they manage learning for. And I think both of them have mentioned things which I also see with my discussions with other customers. One thing which is definitely a biggest change, which I know, is the learner centricity of the overall planning and strategy. So initially, I know when we used to talk to customers for technology solutions, the focus, if not like 100%, was very high on how to manage things better, how to have efficiency in the system. And of course, it was all aligned for the learners, but the focus was primarily on to do things more in an organized manner. In the last 2 years, that has that is even no more like a big discussion now. Of course, tools have evolved; those have become hygiene factors now. But the drastic change I have seen is all the discussions now, small or large companies, is how will the learners be able to use this? How does it fit into their flow of work? And especially in the pandemic times when we all know, even things like Zoom fatigue or work burnout, they're all real things. So I've seen companies don't want to overload learners with the responsibility of finding out stuff and what do they need to learn. I think so that is also a big change, is to be able to deliver things as Namita mentioned when they need it, but more than that, it is also exactly what they need and nothing more, nothing less. And so personalization of the learning requirements, being able to map. So the tools have to evolve to be able to not just to deliver, but also able to understand a learner profile.
Right.
That's where the tools are going into all the LXPs and the LMSs. They're looking at technologies like AI to understand the learner profile better. And before the learners even come and search for things, can they be recommended things? Okay, you did this, and we know this is your skill profile, so these 3 or 4 things may be good for you in the next 6 months or 9 months.
Right.
I think for me, that's and I totally echo with the Dr. Sinha and Namita's viewpoint. That's what we are also seeing.
Sure.
And I think the good thing is, which might be a bigger long-term sign, is that these are happening at companies of all scale. It is not just a thing happening at a larger company or a smaller company. Of course, scale makes it all the more different, but the approach towards learning is very similar now across companies. So that is what I think is a good sign for the L&D to come.
Sure, absolutely. And you spoke of hyper personalization. So I wanted to pick that up first. And Dr. Sinha, I wanted to come to you. We are talking, and you did mention about using AR, VR, and all the personalization that we will have to really look at when we deploy these different digital tools, and how are they really meeting the needs of the different learner profiles that we may have. Is there something that you have observed while implementing these solutions at your organization? What is it looking like for you?
Okay. On the technology side, we talked actually, and I think Amit also mentioned about technology side, about AR, VR, all these things. But few points I would like to just mention here, or some perspective also I want to put here on the technology, importance of technology piece, because that helps in building the culture also. See, the difficult technology normally, it is difficult for if suppose something is difficult for the learner to access that or easily actually go through the whole system, and it takes a lot of training program for the L&D professional to actually train the users or the learners how to use that tool. Probably that will be a big no kind of thing in the current situation. Because there is two aspects. One is the technology piece itself, but it is also about the experience. The learner experience with the tool, and that is a very important factor. If the learner doesn't get a good experience with the tool, most likely it is very difficult to push that tool inside the organization. It is something like as simple as even whenever we are buying any new gadget also, we hardly go to the user manual. What we want is that just it should be intuitive enough so that I should be able to go through the whole thing. I should do whatever the function it is intended for. Those era of those thick manuals which used to come with the whole any product, that is now over, I will say.
Right.
So the learner experience actually is also a very important factor besides the technology. And if you see the movement, this experience part, actually this is also equally important for the learning platform. It has started with LMS. Those who are in this field since last 10-15 years, they know how difficult it used to be actually to train the user where to click, how to go to the next screen, how you will go to the assignments, all those things. It was a training in itself, actually, I will say, or it was a task in itself.
Right.
From those kind of LMS to be moved to actually the LXP, which is around last 4-5 years or 6 years that LXP is in vogue actually, and people are trying. The personalization and the hyper personalization, both words are basically right now. And why this personalization is that because of the giving a good experience to the learner, and that experience count. Even now, what we are seeing is that even LXP we are moving actually. Now the new term is coming, which is called as a learning in the flow of work. And this flow of work is very important. Those who have noticed that if in the, and why this flow of work? Because everything is embedded. Learning is embedded inside your day-to-day work. That is the concept coming. If you have opened the Word file, or probably you have noticed the Word file when you are typing a CV or resume, suddenly at the right pan, you will find that LinkedIn recommendations are coming. What Microsoft had done actually, they have very tightly integrated the CV assistant into the Word files. I think sometimes back, I saw one promo which was by Skillsoft, where Skillsoft has integrated that Percipio platform into the MSC, Microsoft Teams itself. And I think it is going to be launched in next 2-3 months. So here to give user a much better experience, the learning in the flow of work is the new word we are seeing. So one side is the technology which helps in creating the culture. Same time the user experience which he is getting, that is also very important.
No, absolutely. I think that's in the center. So learning in the flow of work. Namita, how are you managing this? Are we there yet? How far are we?
No, I would say that all these things are ever evolving.
Yeah.
So instead of saying are we there yet or not, I would like to put it, we are moving with the pace. Certainly not behind. Let me put it like that. Yeah. And also to your earlier question on the hyper personalization bit of it, and also what Dr. Sinha said, I kind of resonate with most of his thoughts and what he says. And exactly the same things is what we did at Bajaj Allianz General Insurance, where we brought in our LXP. And then with the LXP, and I keep saying this on various platforms and to my team also, a platform is as good as the people who are using it. So getting a platform is the first step, not the last step, so to say, or not the end of it. So we got a platform which is an AI driven, gives people recommendation, makes their learning more personalized, derives data which gives you a learner's behavior, helps you in aligning the content back to it. But then there are certain other things also that we did with it, which is curating pathways, wherein what Dr. Sinha was saying, that if somebody wants to learn, he or she can go to Google. Then why this? This because we are making it more easy for you. We're giving you an experience which is very personalized. We are packaging things so that you don't have to go through thousands of content to find that one good content that would meet your requirement. And last and not the least, you are getting all of this at the time of the need, which is what is learning in the flow of work. You are doing something, you need some quick tips, you go onto the portal, get those tips, come back, apply it. So that's how we are looking at it. That's the approach that we have followed, which what it does is when you package things together, when you socialize it, the whole pull culture gets into the whole pull culture comes, then the employees feel value in it, and then they keep coming back onto the platform and keep learning. So yeah, that's what it is from my side on this.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Namita. And at this point, I also wanted to share with our audience that if you have questions, if you have insights, how you are managing learning in the flow of work, if there are different LXPs that you've tried, if there are any experiences that you'd like to share, feel free to do that in the chat window. But do ensure when you are sharing something in the chat, you select everyone and not just hosts and panelists. Otherwise, other attendees in the session don't get to see your insights. So do keep that in mind. Now, I want to shift gears a little bit, and we've spoken about the user experience. We've spoken about the technology. I want to now talk about the skills. We are talking about the future. We're talking about skills of the future. And at this point, I wanted to also point everyone's attention to this recent research that World Economic Forum came out with, which was called Jobs of Future 2020 report, and it talked about skills of the future and global skills, emerging skills in India. So I wanted to sort of get a sense, what are those skills that we are really building in our organizations? And for that, what I'd like to do is I want to run this poll. I am hoping you're all able to see this on your screen now. For the audience, please go ahead and tell us, out of this whole list of skills that you see, what are the top 3 skills your organization is trying to build for your workforce? And just after this, I'll share with you where this is coming from, but I just wanted to see, where are we when it comes to, the global hot skills of the future? Are we really also focusing on the same skills within our organization? So as you answer that and we, get those results, I'd also like to, go to Amit. And Amit, with your experience with multiple organizations, what according to you are the top 3 skills you've heard more and more organizations wanting to build, for their workforce?
Sure. I think, for me, what I have seen is the one skill which we have been talking about a lot in the last couple of years. And I think that is something which is going to stay for long, is the resilience and the stress tolerance and the flexibility of the learners and the employees.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the last years, what it has done is it has kind of put everybody to test.
Mm-hmm.
It has exposed all our chinks in the armor in terms of where we stand. And I think the most it did was it kind of put us all in a zone of insecurity and even personal safety and life at risk. And that, along with the work to be done in an office environment, I think that is something which we need. I'm sure everybody has gone through, a varying level of stress, but stress has been something which has already been there for the last 2 years. So how a company, how an individual, how a learner, an employee, how they deal with this, how resilient they are and they become, how do they tolerate the stress and how flexible they are, because there is I think we all now believe that anything like this could happen again and
Mm-hmm.
something else could happen again. And we may again be, be tossed and turned in the VUCA environment. So I think resilience and the stress tolerance is number one thing which companies are talking about.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of when it comes to how to perform better, the reasoning is where, reasoning and the problem solving is where the focus is very highly on.
Mm-hmm.
And the third is the complex problem solving, especially for larger companies. How do you solve complex problems when people cannot meet in person, they cannot be in the same room? How do you collaborate, communicate, and solve the complex problems? So I think these 3, I would say, at least in my observations, are the top ones.
Wonderful. Thanks, Amit. And, I've also shared the poll results. I'm hoping you are able to see the results on your screen. Yeah. So, okay, quite a divided house here. So I think by way of the responses that have come through, on top, of course, is analytical thinking and innovation. So 47% have voted for that. And I'd asked for top 3. So the rest 2, I think, are at the same percentage split. So if you look at active learning and learning strategies at 34%, critical thinking and analysis again at 34%, And then we have leadership and social influence, which is at 34%. So if I were to pick top three, if we were to look at all the attendees representing corporate India, so to say, then the top three skills would be analytical thinking and innovation, active learning and learning strategies, critical thinking and analysis, and I think we can take one more for which is leadership and social influence. Namita, what is it looking like for you? Are the poll results talking to what you are observing in your organization?
Yes, more or less close to this, but there are two other pieces that I think, one that Amit spoke about, being resilient, because like you say, now the way we are moving forward, if not this, something else will come up. So we have to be ready for whatever comes next. So being resilient, yes. And also, I think the whole digital mindset is very important. And I'll tell you why. Not because we are in this situation and we are moving digitally, but I personally feel that now that we have tested this and we have tasted this both, we've seen that we were doing some kind of work in certain manner, but now the same can be done with better efficiency and probably optimal utilization of resources, so to say. That's why building that mindset is very, very important, to look at every aspect in that lens, from that lens. So I feel that's also one important skill. And yeah, I saw in the result there was some mention of social skills. I think emotional intelligence has been an important piece, but it is all the more important now, especially in the setup that we are in. So yeah, these are some of the skills that I feel we are also looking at.
Great, thank you. And I'll now go to Dr. Sinha. And if you want to see the results once again, sir, this is in front of you. Tell me, what is it looking like for you?
Yes, in this result. Yes. So yeah, it is echoing. Many things are echoing. Just to add few points here, actually, because you mentioned about the World Economic Forum, that report, the top 10, I think you mentioned about that. They come up with this top 10 report every few short report, actually they publish every year also, but in general in every 5 years they actually do a very big survey and then come up. And if you compare with the top 10 in 2015 and top 10 in the recent one, which is I think 2020, they have published the few very important shift we have seen. At the few things which I have jotted down, just see how the shift is happening. In the 2015 report, creativity was the 10th position. There was something called quality control, which was at the 6th position. There was something called service orientation, which was at the 7th position. So that was there were a few more actually was there, but these three, why I picked up, see the importance at that point of time given by the corporates, the professional world, that what is the future skill of the future. Now these things all have shifted. If you see the top skills, actually what we are talking, the dominant one are those which is basically all the 10. If you see, actually everything is dominated by the complex problem solving or analytical thinking or the critical thinking, everything where our cognition is actually involved. In the earlier one, that way it was not there. Actually the quality control or the service orientation is not so much directly linked with the cognitive skill actually, but now the whole list is actually dominated by these cognitive skills or the traits of the human. So the one inference which we can draw from that list is that the skill mandate for the future is to be more human. We talk about emotional intelligence, or we talk about social influence, or all those things, critical thinking or complex problem solving. The skill mandate for 2020 by the World Economic Forum is that be more human. That is the way I look at that report.
No,
so that is the one inference I am just drawing, just to put that point actually here, just to trigger some thoughts. Coming on the specific cases to the L&T, what we are doing actually. So there are a lot of changes happened last around 1 year or maybe more than 1 year actually. We have our own competency framework. A lot of new competencies has been added there, and many were actually fine-tuned. The competency definition itself was fine-tuned. Few entries which I recall is that which was or fine-tuned, which was done actually last year or maybe 16-17 months back, is the critical thinking, complex problem solving, learning agility, digital mindset. These are the competency which was added into or fine-tuned into the L&T's competency framework. Few something which is not exactly being part of that competency framework, but because of pandemic, it became much more important. Is one of them is the resilience also. A lot of focus is now in the organization about the resilience. So that is the skill set I see that which is coming mostly going from the whatever audience is telling with, so maybe you can say some weightage here and there, but yes, every organization operates in their own setup, their own uh, the limit boundaries actually, so that maybe some ranking might be keep on changing for organization to organization.
Right. No, absolutely. So Abhijit Das here, one of our attendees, is talking about while EQ has been recognized as a trailblazer, especially in the wake of AI and automation, doesn't it remain incomplete without IQ? So he's saying IQ plus EQ is equal to a value professional. And I'm absolutely sure that everyone would agree to that, Abhijit. Valid point. Amit, I wanted to ask you a different question now, and we did start with skills. We looked at all the top skills for the future. I think in the last 2 years we have realized that you can undertake upskilling, right, through digital mediums. We are talking upskilling, reskilling, cross skilling, all of those things. Now, and these things have come up time and again where we are talking about our education system as well, and our whole degree courses that we pursued, and 3 years, 4 years ago, or 10 years ago when you did an MBA, how relevant is it today? So what are you seeing? What is the trend when it comes to a higher education in the light of the whole skilling revolution that we are witnessing?
So yeah, it's a little tricky question. So see, I mean, I'll try to explain it as simple as possible in my own words. So it's like when let's say we are in an orbit, and to go around in the orbit at a good pace, we need to do our short-term skilling. So we need to keep skilling ourselves so that we remain in the orbit, we don't fall down, and we still keep in the orbit and we at the same pace. But if we have to change the orbit to a higher orbit, there has to be a consistent and a very thought about process to learn just not short-term skills, but like a whole area of, like a direction of skills. So I think the higher education system, it has to align towards that objective where it allows people, because there are some things which need to be learned with focus and they need time. And while yes, we can do a lot of upskilling, reskilling in the flow of work, but they will always help you with for the next 3 months or 6 months. But they don't change your mindset to a large extent. They will change your awareness. They'll change your, I think, a little bit of a behavioral change. But I think from an engineer to an MBA mindset, it is not possible to go and do a 2-month online course and just do that, full change of how you approach solutions and problems. So I think higher education, with a focus towards alignment of skills to maybe near future, because as Dr. Sinha said, in just 5 years the whole focus of skills has changed, and it is now something else what it was supposed to be. So when it was published 5 years back, that was supposed to be future of skills for the next 10 years at least, but it has changed within 3-4 years of that report being published. So I think the number one skill which has to be now taught in any program is that things can change. So how do you develop a mindset which can cope up with any problems? And higher education, for me, let's say I spent 2 years in an MBA, and I never thought that they are 2 years which I could have used somewhere else, because those 2 years with full focus and no distractions, they gave me something which I cannot learn in the flow of work. It is very, very difficult to do that. That's, I think, but yes, what is absolutely critical is that the programs are designed and defined very, very cleverly. They do not become a, like, for example, in our engineering, I remember our first of engineering was to learn everything. We used to do carpentry, welding, everything. But my branch was computer science. So, I always feel to understand why will I do that. Of course, I have done some DIY now in the last 6 months. I could have used some of that, but that is, I think that 1 year could have been spent in a very focused way. So I think well defined. So maybe instead of 2 years, it could be a 1 year program with very high focus, a lot of experts, experiences sharing. But I think it's absolutely critical, because there has to be some way to certify that this person understands these areas of problem solving in a very defined manner. So that's my take on that.
Sure. Namita, I wanted to come to you. What is it looking like for you in your organization? I mean, organizations have also always sponsored education for employees, right? I mean, we've sent people to different educational programs. We've allowed them sabbaticals, and we've given them the chance where they can actually, enroll in these courses. Do you see that shifting? Do you see that, becoming more robust? What are some of your observations around this?
So my thoughts around this would be, I would feel that both of these things, with the skill development through short-term courses or through self-learning, as well as the higher education, will coexist even in future, as they have very different objectives. And I think Amit, in a very simple manner, he explained why both of them have a different objective and are important. So from our point of view also, we would be investing our energies on both of it, depending upon which cohort needs what, and what is the value that we intend to drive out of it. So to simply put, I would not say it would be either or. I think they will coexist as they serve different purposes, and both of these are very, very important for an organization to grow.
Perfect. Thank you. Dr. Sinha, any quick comments on that?
Yeah, no, completely agree with both that. Yes, both the short term and long term has their own importance in the whole schema of the thing. But broadly speaking, what exactly we are seeing actually when we are talking about the long term or the whole higher education, it takes around 16-17 years of the education, and then you become a more like a well-rounded person, and that will help you. And generally, because it is a very broad based, and it helps in broadening the whole thought process. It enlarges the whole thinking process, the cognitive process, everything. It gets much more broader actually look out. And that is very much essential. If we again going back to the World Economic Forum, that report, if we see that what it is talking, those people, those skills or those traits are more important, which will help you to handle the uncertainties of the future. And that is more important.
Right.
And especially for the leaders, the business leaders, or those who are actually handling the bigger one, maybe at the junior level or something where it might not be that much important. Of course, it will be important. I'm not saying that, but maybe relatively. But those who are handling the senior position or the mid-level position, they need to handle the uncertainties of the future. And there, the whole education system is very much important. And also there is also one perspective. Why I'm telling this is not, there is a lot of things are written about our education system, especially the Indian education system. There are many good things, and there are not so many good things also we have seen if you go through the papers and the research papers. But also there is a perspective, and why I'm putting this perspective here is that this is the same education system, whatever we say about this, but this is the same education system which created the whole IT industry in India. This is the same education system which has created the companies like the Infosys and all those kind of big names. Those people are product of the same education system. And probably what helped them in spite of all those limitations in the ecosystem. In fact, in one of the forum, I believe Narayan Murthy had said that in spite of all those things, actually Infosys prospered. Those license or those era when they actually has created the whole the kind of a kingdom in itself, or the organization in itself. So there is a merit in the whole education system, the merit in the whole degree system, and that actually helps a lot in this kind of situation. The skills have their importance, there's no doubt on that, but those are the short-term things, maybe for the immediate 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, but not beyond that, I see, because it is so fast changing that you cannot bank on those short-term things. That is my take on the whole thing.
Great. Okay, so maybe we need to tighten a few things, when it comes to our higher education. But you all of you agree to the fact that they'll peacefully coexist and not really cannibalize each other. Wonderful takeaway there. With that, I wanted to move to our next section where I wanted to talk a little bit about the hybrid learning. Right now, we are talking about future of work. We know that it is hybrid. We are looking at hybrid workplace, hybrid working arrangements, and all of that. And Swati earlier on asked this question, that how are you ensuring that your learning team is future ready, and are you inching towards hybrid approach for engaging learners? So while we are looking at a hybrid workplace, are we also looking at hybrid learning? And we did talk a little bit about the in-person versus virtual learning, and how what all we will perhaps address through virtual modes and what through in-person. But Namita, if I were to come to you now and give us a sense of whether hybrid approach to learning is also something that's going to go big in the future.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with what you're saying. And I think the future of the learning is a good blend of a traditional and the digital learning. I mean, we cannot say that we'll go fully digital and prosper, or fully classroom or virtual sessions, what we call now. So both of these are very, very important because they serve different purposes, like if I may say so. A digital learning, what it does is it empowers a learner. It gives a flexibility to the learner to learn what they want to learn at the time they want to learn, and helps them in applying that on a real-time basis. Whereas the classroom session or the virtual ILT sessions has its own objective. Whenever you want to impart a skill at an application level, where you want to give your learner an experience of how this gets applied, how it works in a simulated environment, or whenever you're talking about certain functional expertise, which requires a facilitator to facilitate a session and give an in-depth understanding of that particular subject or a topic, you need a virtual session, you need a facilitator-led session. So for me, I think the future is a blended learning, which has a good mix of digital as well as the traditional classroom or a facilitator-driven sessions. Yeah.
Sure, and to Swati's point earlier, she also wanted to know how are you ensuring that your learning team is future ready? Are you doing something to build their capabilities as well?
So, very interesting question actually, and I'm very happy to say that we as an organization are very, very focused on development of our HR team, not just the learning team, but the HR team overall. As much focus is there on the development of employees. So when we create any learning journeys for our functional expertise, we ensure that we also do the same with our HR team. So it's given. So for me, my end customer is not just the employee, it's all the employees, inclusive of my team, as well as the entire HR team. What else do we do within the team? I think this entire space of digital learning, the entire space of looking at the content, curation of the content, the whole experiential learning, the instructional learning to an experiential learning, it's new for a lot of us. And we do things, we learn things, and then we make mistakes, we correct it, come back to the drawing board. I think that's the best way of learning is what I feel. Of course, there are a lot of certification programs out there which team goes through, but I think what works best and has worked best for us is doing, learning, coming back to the blackboard, seeing what worked, what didn't work, and yeah, rejigging the strategies.
Great, thanks for sharing that, Swati. I hope you got your answer. Dr. Sinha, I wanted to get your perspective as well on that. Is there anything underway for the learning team, and what is the hybrid learning looking like at L&T?
Yeah. Earlier we talked about this, that probably that ratio is tilted now. Means just it has taken 180-degree turn, 70-30, 80-20, whatever ratio may be varying, but predominantly it is going to be a digital, and 70-30 maybe the ratio we can expect in the future. Some niche program will go into classroom mode, but the balance or the learning, the word which is used is the democratization of learning, and that is the basically is going to be in the digital mode. So those kind of mix we will see, and see as the challenge still here is, or right now is challenge still here is the effectiveness of the whole training program in the online mode, means in the blended mode or the digital mode. And my take is that it is still jury is out. We are not really very sure that whether either or scenario or which one is going to be more effective, because the when technology is also evolving, which is helping in delivering the online mode of the training. Even virtual ILT, if I remember, at the start of the pandemic or the earlier, even creating a breakout room was a very difficult thing. There was no option in the Teams. Those who were using the Zoom had actually this breakout room since long, but Microsoft Teams very recently added that breakout rooms.
Yeah.
Adobe Connect has another feature called engagement meter. I think the name is different, but they actually tracks that what user is doing or what learner is doing, whether he is in front of the screen, whether he has opened some new screen, immediately his engagement score will go down. Whether he is responding to all the queries or the questions asked by the faculty, it will further, basically it keeps on giving. They have some kind of algorithm built behind the whole thing, which can track your screen, which can track the user, and then some kind of engagement score it gives. And there the whole purpose is that if suppose the engagement score is very low, tutor can or the faculty can immediately prompt that person, bring back that learner into the classroom. So right now technology is also evolving, even faculty is also learning, actually, I will say.
Yeah.
So the effectiveness piece is still, I will say, it's slightly, it will take some time to really understand where we are.
Yeah.
But going by the current scenario, we can safely say that probably the digital will be the dominant one.
Okay.
We have also converted most of the programs. See, pandemic time was a different time. While we have done many things, but there is something different actually. Something for which you are forced and then doing, that is a different thing. You did not have any option at that point of time. So the most of the programs got converted into online mode. So that is a different set. But once the situation starts getting normalized, then we will see how actually the user reaction is, how the social aspect of the learning, which is also a very important thing, is coming into picture. So those things we will see. But yes, at this point of time, L&T also has converted almost all the programs in the virtual, either in the virtual ILT mode or in the digital mode. Either we have converted on ourselves or we have helped the training providers to convert. In fact, L&T has a very robust and then very marquee kind of program, leadership program called 7-step leadership program, starting from very junior level to up to the chairman's level. So all the program, of course, seventh step is more about coaching and mentoring, but below that there is a lot of training interventions are there, and everything is got converted into virtual mode. And actually we got help from the Harvard and INSEAD and those Roche School. Those marquee name actually helped us in converting, because those programs are actually conducted by those faculties only.
Right.
So blend is there, but as I say, effectiveness part is still like a question. We will see with time how it is.
Right, to that point, as you mentioned, effectiveness, Amit, Nidish had earlier on asked, how do you measure the ROI of online, online for the skill building, everything that's happening digitally? Any observations that you have?
I think that's something which has been a question for both the learning teams and the learning service providers for a long time. And it's purely a little tricky because of the multiple factors involved in an outcome of a situation. So if a learner performs better, it is not easy to figure out what led to that performance. And there are so many factors, internal and external factors involved. So I think what companies focus on is, I think all they focus on is a gradual and a collective, output which is getting better. And I think some of the business numbers also they might show you a good kind of answer. But again, like in pandemic, even if I have learned something better, but my business hasn't done well because of the pandemic situation, it is very difficult to figure out what did not work well for the learner or for the company. So I think that is one thing which, so the focus has always been on measuring these smaller pieces of outcome, like maybe step feedback mechanisms built into the flow of work, we're getting feedback from the managers or the team, or the 360 feedback on the performance of the person, and trying to create micro level trends that, okay, in 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months time, performance is gradually becoming better along with the learning programs. That is what I have seen in, I think not in many customers, but a couple of customers they've tried. It's a tedious process because it needs a lot of data, a lot of interventions, but that is what I know has worked for a few customers.
Yeah. No, and Julie is again asking, do we have any companies that have actually calculated ROI in the true sense? And Julie, I don't have any at the top of my mind. So if panelists, you know of any companies, and I quite agree with Amit, right? It's hard to do. I think it's an intervention in itself to be able to calculate ROI in the monetary terms, so to say. You might be able to still show a knowledge enhancement or maybe skill development over a period of time, behavior change as well. But if you're talking ROI in terms of really financials, then I'm not sure if somebody has done it successfully. But maybe Dr. Sinha, I'll come to you. You're smiling away. You have something.
This is thanks. Why am I smiling? Because on every forum I see this question, and I always treat this ROI of I am actually migrated to HR, so maybe my views will be different. I moved from different function to HR last 4 or 5 years back. The ROI problem in the training is like a holy grail. No one has seen that, to best of my knowledge. And I have done a lot of research. My research work is in the knowledge management. I have done a lot of work in this field, in the knowledge management. I have not seen anything. Because see, there are 2-3 types of problem. One is the simple problem, which you can solve. There are complex problems. So even if right now it is not solvable, but I can solve this problem because there are a lot of cause and effect relationship you understand between those problems. And once you understand that cause and effect relationship between the various parameters or the various player or agent of that problem, you can solve that problem. It might be a complex, but you will be able to solve. But there is other category of problem which is called wicked problem. And those wicked problem is no one even understands the gravity of that problem. No one knows who all are the actors in this problem. And training ROI is that kind of problem. We don't really understand at this point of whatever knowledge we have that what all actors are in this game actually. On face there are 4 or 5 actors, but the whole environment is the actor actually. And if we don't know who all are the acting in this whole play actually, how we will solve that problem? So with the current level of knowledge, my understanding, my take is that it is a wicked problem. It is not a complex problem. It is a wicked problem which you cannot solve.
Right.
Complex problem is a solvable problem, even if with current knowledge, but we know that we can solve. But this is at that category. That's why I was smiling. This is a question.
I would remember that. I would remember that, Dr. Sinha. And the next time someone asks me for that ROI, I tell them there's a difference between the complex problem and the wicked problem. This is hard to solve. Namita, you were saying something.
Yeah, I actually have a very different take on this. I mean, especially looking at the digital learning. As L&D experts, we need to really understand at what level do we really want to derive the ROI and what will be the matrices for those ROIs? Because it's a very different setup now. Are you looking at the stickiness? How many times a learner comes back to the platform? What time he or she spends on learning? Or are you going to look at the after learning something, what's the first level of the feedback he gives? Because see, at the end of the day, together as learning experts, we have to really come to a consensus and probably research a little bit more to say that at what level do we want to derive the ROI on it? Do we want to stop at a learner feedback and say this is a micro learning course? He or she needed some information. He got it. The feedback is good. It helped me. It helped him solve the purpose. Done. ROI achieved. Or go to the level 2 and say what's the manager saying. Are there any behavioral changes observed? And stop there. So it's a I would say it's a field which needs to be researched a little more. But yeah, then I also feel it should be looked at from a different lens, not the traditional ROI, so to say, that if I do this, will it have a direct correlation on the money that I bring in or the productivity? Because at the end of the day, productivity or the revenue, there are multiple factors that drives that piece. So yeah, that's what I was trying to
No, absolutely. Well said, Namita. Thank you. And Amit, we have about 6 minutes left before we end the session. Gayatri has posted this question again. I anyway had that in mind that I'll ask that question. I've been saving that for last. But Amit, if you'd want to take a first shot at that, she wants to know how companies are doing. What are they doing to upscale around the area of resilience, stress tolerance, flexibility? Since today they say it has happened in the workforce, not by choice, neither was it planned. And I'm guessing she's talking about the pandemic. So Amit, any observations that you'd like to share?
I think it's a two-part solution which companies are implementing. The number one and the most important part is the communication with the employees. I think the first step towards people feel a little assured and calm is to tell them that everything is okay, we are in control. And it's not on everybody's shoulder to face that kind of stress. I think that is what I've seen companies do really well in the last 2 years, almost 2 years, is that not only they put a priority on mental well-being of the employees, they actually let the employees know that this is a priority and let them be comfortable with the situation. So if somebody is able to not join for the first half of the meeting or the day or second half of the day, or maybe for some reasons, I think the understanding and the empathy shown by the entire company, and that communication that it is okay to be not okay in that sense. I think that is the most important thing, because then employees feel really, really taken care of. And of course, the second is there has to be some organized way of bringing together all the people in either let's say as simple as mindfulness sessions or well-being sessions, or just, and I think keeping them voluntary, instead of creating a schedule for everybody to do that, but keeping them voluntary to a large extent. That has I have seen helped a lot of companies. But yeah, that's my observations.
Sure.
We try a few things at our side in our scale, but I think the most important is to be able to talk to every one of your company employees and say, it's fine, we'll go through this together. It's not really something we cannot read through.
Sure. Namita, any quick comments that you may want to share?
Yeah, I think what Amit spoke about, communication by and large is very, very important, and which is exactly what we have done. And these are certain skills that you will not be able to develop overnight, and there's no manual, so to say. So the approach that we followed is a top-down, where the leaders ensured that they communicated well, and they communicated that it's okay to be not okay, and exactly what Amit is saying. But yeah, it was everybody having its same voice, so that nobody felt that I am the only person who is raising it. One is that. And second is, of course, there were a lot of other channels through which people can reach out to counselors or can get certain expert advice on certain situations. Those all were formal channels. But I think what worked for us and is the communication, and leaders, the top management, people look up to, who they look at as their role model, giving them that comfort that we are in it together and we will come out as winners. I think that really helped.
Great, thanks for that, Namita. Rajiv, quickly, do you have any insights to share there?
About well-being you are asking, or
about resilience and flexibility at work? What is it that we can do in our organizations to be able to support employees better?
Okay. So I agree with that, what Namita was telling, that communication, and I think especially communication from top leadership, and that is a kind of very important factor in bringing the resilience, because unless they are acting like a role model, it is very difficult for the mid-level or junior level person to think in that.
Right. So Gayatri, I think, what's standing out is that, it's not something that you can do just by means of, let's say, a classroom training program. It's something that you really have to live and demonstrate, right? So
I agree.
And especially when it comes from the top leadership, when they are demonstrating this in their, daily behaviors, and they are sort of expressing that empathy through their, actions and deeds. I think that's where, people also see the genuineness of it all. So I think in more and more companies, at least during the time of the pandemic, with the way the whatever benefits they may have given their employees, whether those were on the medical lines, whether that was time off, a lot of things that they did. So I don't think in isolation, just running initiatives may help. but yeah, collectively, how do you really support employees in different means and forms? I think that's something that most companies have tried doing, and that's what's also standing out here. Well, we are almost at the end of our time, and of course, we were talking digital first. We were talking learning strategies for the future, and we had about 100 participants, and some of them are dropping out now. I'm guessing they'll have other engagements. But before you leave the session today, I wanted to tap into the collective wisdom of this group. 100 participants and 3 panelists that we have here. I wanted all of you to tell us, after listening to this hour-long conversation, what's standing out for you. What do you think are going to be, the top digital learning strategies for the future? So as I bring that up for you on the screen, follow the same drill that you did at the beginning. Go to menti.com, use the code that's flashing on the screen on the top, 56591086. Tell us, what do you think are going to be top digital learning strategies for the future? And while you answer that, very quickly from all the panelists, if you could tell us for you, what's going to be that top digital strategy of the future? Namita, I'll come to you first.
I think for us, it would be the democratization of learning, ensuring that you give a learner what they want, make it as personalized, make it convenient and simple for them to learn. I think that's what everybody looks forward to. I think that has been my learning. Make micro content is easy to consume, make it convenient for them, make it simple for them, and give them what they want, make it personalized, allow them to choose what they want. I think.
Yeah, we used to call it the KISS principle, right? Keep it short and simple.
Yeah, I think some of the basics, some sticking to basics always helps. Then you can build further. But yeah, that's what it is for us.
Absolutely. Dr. Sinha?
Okay. One area which this year we are focusing from L&T point of view, I'm telling that one area which we are focusing this year is the coaching area, basically using the digital technology in the coaching. I will say less traveled area. We are also experimenting and how to use AI and ML in providing the coaching. We have just started something with basic things. I will say not so big thing, but basic things, that English communication, which is a kind of must for our kind of job. So using AI based coaching intervention for the English communication, that is the pilot we are running, and if it goes as per plan, we will probably add this particular technology. We will use this technology in the personal development coaching also. This is the one area which is the focus area for this year for us. Besides all other which we have already, maybe some additional focus will go there, but new thing will be this one. The AI based coaches is the area which we will explore.
Great, so wonderful to know. Amit, quick insights from you. What are your top?
I think in my view, there's a slight shift happening which might become stronger in future is shifting the responsibility of learning to the learners themselves. Like making them responsible for the learning. So I think like the learning team, the learning functions, they are focusing on being able to give access to everything which is required for the learners, but also transferring some autonomy, authority, and responsibility of being able to learn to the learners. And it might also make it easier or maybe relevant to focus on the ROI discussion for once. Because if learners are able to decide when and what they want to learn, it might be, I think, a little bit more, more democracy in the system and also more autonomy in the system. And less management of training, more would be the access to learning on your own.
Yeah.
You don't have to depend on somebody to tell you that you need to do this for the next 6 months. I know what I need to do for my job, or to perform my job better, or to maybe even change my line of function in the next 6 months or 1 year.
Great, thanks for that, Amit. And while you were sharing that, I was also reading comments in the chat. Some insights coming there from Bhaumik Rana. LQ, DQ, and AQ are the future, where learning quotient, digital quotient, and application quotient are key to culture and longevity, is what he's saying. Payal is saying frugality is an imperative as per our philosophy at InfoEdge. Thanks for sharing that with us, Payal. Wonderful to have you here with us. And before we let you go, quick 2 questions on feedback. Tell us if this was a useful investment of your time. And if you'd like, if you'd recommend this session to others, we love having you in these sessions. We hope that you enjoy these interactions as well. Thanks once again, everyone, for being part of this discussion here today, especially our panelists, Namita, Rajiv, Amit. Thanks for taking time out, sharing those wonderful insights, and speaking so candidly. I'm sure our participants greatly benefited. We will invite you soon for another session, but thanks for now.
Thanks,
you.
Neha. Thank you.
Thanks,
It was a
Neha. Thanks.
great session. Yeah.
Thanks everyone. Have a lovely rest of the evening, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Amit.
Thank
Thanks, Namita. Bye.
Thanks,
Thank
Dr.
you,
Sinha.
Dr.
Thanks,
Thank
Amit.
you, Namita. Good day to all of you. Thank you.